What's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you due to a cultural misunderstanding? Not exactly cultural, but when I was teaching in Tanzania I studied Swahili pretty hardcore. Studying so fast, I was bound to confuse some verbs. Tembea means to walk in Swahili, while tombia means to frick. Making conversation with dozens of villagers in a day. In the villages you are expected to socialize with almost everyone. I repeatedly told several groups of people that I was tired from fricking all day in the intense heat. People laughed uncomfortably, but then I thought I was just making a grammar mistake. I told my entire host family, including their 4 small children. I told my students, a room full of 4th graders. I told farmers I met on the road, young men fixing motorcycles, my friends at a barber shop. I told the old women's sewing circle, one of the most respected institutions in the village. It wasn't until I was saying it to a bilingual kindergarten teacher in front of his entire class that he stopped me, mid-sentence, and told me in English what I was saying. Timber, his arms wide. Not me, but my friend. He moved here from France when he was 15. His cousin told him that a polite American greeting was to say, "Up yours." For a while he went around enthusiastically shaking people's hands and saying, "Up yours." My mom really liked the fried noodles that were served with soup at this Asian restaurant. She asked what they were called, and decided to tell everyone about the Kwankai noodles. It was a good while before she realized the waitress was just saying crunchy noodles with an accent. I was hanging out with some work friends. One was from Scotland, the other Venezuela. Both had very thick accents. The Venezuelan was always trying to pick up girls. He asked the Scotsman if he had any sisters, to which he replied, "Yes, but she has Down syndrome." The Venezuelan didn't understand and asked, "Yeah, but is she single?" The only time my Japanese grandfather yelled at anyone was when my mother wasn't slurping her soup because it was making my grandmother upset by not doing so. When she tried to explain that it is rude in Western culture, he roared back at her, "When in Rome, do as Romans do." Granted, this was the same grandfather that learned English by memorizing 1 page of the dictionary at a time front and back and then eating it to internalize it. I miss him. Granted, this was the same grandfather that learned English by memorizing 1 page of the dictionary at a time front and back and then eating it to internalize it. Sorry if I'm the first to tell you, but your grandpa's not from Japan, he's an alien symbiote. My vegan friend would wear this t-shirt that said "Murder King," a stab at Burger King's meat, all the time. He lived by it, would always tell us the horror stories from the slaughterhouses he protested at. So we walk into this dinner buffet, and everyone just stops and stares at us, giving us these mean butt looks with faces of shock, disgust and rage. Before he said anything, we noticed a higher than normal attendance of black people at this buffet. Yep, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Fastest he ever walked out of a restaurant. First one I've read that actually made me cringe. I spent time in Kenya, where people freely pick their nose. They'd look you right in the eye while having a conversation, digging for nose gold. Initially I was offended, but I quickly learned to love the freedom of it, and did it without regard. When I got back to the States, I learned quickly that job interviews are not the location to pull bats out of the cave. Till about Kenya, land of the free. My buddy moved from the UK to the USA and got a job at a Catholic thrift store. His boss was a really nice, old priest. One day my friend told the priest he was going to sneak out back for a quick F. The priest looked rather shocked but then said, "Okay, do whatever you need to do, but I need you back here in a half hour." That seems very understanding for a Catholic priest. This was more a cultural understanding. I was in Istanbul a couple months ago. I started my period and ran out of the supplies I brought. I had no clue where to buy them from as I hadn't seen a grocery store around our hotel. I had noticed a little corner store, so walked over there. They sold things like toilet paper, so I figured they would have what I needed. I walked up to the guy at the register and asked if he spoke English. He shook his head and started talking in Turkish. I've looked all around the store but can't find any pads or tampons anywhere. I put a hand on my chest and say, "For me. I need something just for me." He gave me a nod, reached under the counter and wrapped something up. I paid and left with a mysterious new paper wrapped bundle, still not sure if I got what I needed. When I got back to my hotel, I unwrapped the package to find pads. It was a good day. A friend of mine was in Greece having her period. Looked around in a corner shop. Couldn't find anything. Asked the girl working there, but too much of a language barrier to make herself clear. She ended up gesturing wildly between her legs with several clerks trying to figure out what she wanted, until one of them yelled, "Tampon." Yes, tampon. That's the word for it in Greek. American here. I was studying in Vienna, Austria during college. Halloween rolled around and a bunch of us decided to get dressed up for the night. I lived quite a bit away from downtown and had to take public transportation to get to where my friends were. That night I learned 2 things. 1. Austrians don't dress up for Halloween. 2. A 6 feet 3 inches werewolf complete with fangs and fake blood scares the crap out of most everyone taking public transportation in Vienna. Should have gone to London. I low-led when a friend from India told me he was looking at a bunch of pictures of girls his parents had sent him to look at, to pick a wife. Then later I realized he was serious. In my defense, he did sound like he was kidding, but it turned out he was just slightly embarrassed that I had walked in while he was browsing and he couldn't make up a plausible story. Yeah, I didn't think that was still done, but a guy here at work did something similar. His parents found him find a girl online, and they chatted online and on the phone for about 2 months. Then he flew home for a month to get married. I asked him if it was common, and he said not really, but some families still do it. I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, late at night and at one of those little restaurants that opens under an overpass or something with some plastic chairs and stuff only when it's really late. I ordered a phad kaprao, stir-fried pork with basil on rice, from the old lady and ate it in silence. When it came time to pay, I didn't have any money in my pockets. Luckily, for some reason I thought I was in a dodgy area, so I had hidden some money in my shoe, as a safety measure. So when the lady asked for my money and I took it out of my shoe, she absolutely flipped out at me, screaming. I couldn't understand the problem until she grabbed the bill from me and pointed to the picture of the king on it, and then pointed at my shoes. It was only then I understood that since the feet are considered filthy in Thai culture, I had committed a terrible faux pas by putting an image of the sacred Thai king under my feet. I tried to explain there was American money in there too, so I had insulted the USA as well, but she wasn't having any of it. Haha, I liked your attempt at saving. No, see, I wasn't mocking only your country but also mine, so it's okay. But yay, Thais take the king, the head and the feet seriously. I had just moved to Australia to study there for 6 months, and I got invited out to dinner with a bunch of Australians. Aussies are really into sports, so I thought I could earn some points by talking about my favorite teams back home. They started asking me about basketball. I said, "Oh, I root for the Lakers." Long pause, stunned silence, then uproarious laughter. I just smiled along, pretending to get the joke. I went home and asked my roommate, and found out that in Australia, root is a more crude version of the F word. Great first impression. So that's why my Aussie friends get so excited when I offer them root beer. I was visiting Japan for the summer with a group from my university. We were in Hiroshima for a few days and went to visit the Hiroshima Peace Museum. It was a very sobering and slightly disturbing experience that had me on the verge of tears a couple times. When we returned to our hostel later that day, the old couple that owned the place asked us, in Japanese, what we thought of the museum. We had all been taking Japanese for a couple years and had spent 2 months speaking Japanese on a daily basis at this point, but we weren't quite sure how to respond. One of the guys in our group summed it up by just saying that it was a moshiroi, which means interesting. The old Japanese lady just looked at us for a minute before saying, "Well, I suppose it would seem that way to Americans." What none of us realized until he said it is that a moshiroi also means amusing. So he basically told an old Japanese woman who probably lived through World War II that the Hiroshima Peace Museum was funny. She didn't talk to us much after that. Oh my, this made me cringe. freshly arrived in the US to study and my English was none too good. I go to the university's cafeteria and, translating straight from my native language, I ask the guy at the pizza counter how is it going, by which I meant how does this work, what can I say, not very familiar with ordering at a counter. The guy starts telling me about his personal life, and after 30 seconds, I turned around and left the cafeteria, panicked that my English was so bad, I could not even order pizza. I was in Spain traveling for a few weeks with my sis who was living there. I went into a bar bakery to order a couple pastries. There was a bunch of rolls on a shelf behind the bar but only one kind had a little sign hanging from the shelf under them that said something borracious. I didn't necessarily want those, but they were the only labeled ones. So naturally I waved the guy behind the counter and ordered dos borrachos por favor. I had to lean up close behind a couple patrons at the bar because the little place was packed with old timers sipping coffees and chatting. I was pretty timid with my Spanish, so I kinda whispered it. The men sitting near me at the packed counter all stopped talking simultaneously and looked at me. The proprietor, very seriously, said, "Queeris, what do you want?" I shyly said again, with less confidence, dos borrachos por favor. Then all the old men at the counter around me started snickering. The Uber troll barkeep again asked me what I wanted, and he was getting louder. He was raising his voice over the din of the whole shop. He told me to speak up. Most of the tables that had patrons also now were quiet. I was getting a bit frustrated and embarrassed. I thought he was making fun of my accent or I was pronouncing it wrong. I looked hard at the sign, thought back to my AP Spanish class, made sure to roll my R's and dull the B to a V correctly, and I just kinda shouted "Quiero dos borrachos, I want 2 borrachos," and pointed at the sticky buns on the shelf behind the bar counter. He pretty much shouted "Ah yeah, quieres dos borrachos." This time he couldn't keep a straight face and started guffawing, and the whole place erupted. I had no idea what the frick was happening, so I just slinked out, empty-handed and humiliated. I went back to the room where my sister was just waking and said it was no joy on getting us some breakfast pastries. I told her the story, and she started laughing and said, "Why the heck were you trying to order 2 borrachos?" I told her about the pastries and the little sign. She then explained borrachos means drunkards and the sign probably said something to the effect that drunkards were not welcome here and that sign just happened to hang under their pastry shelf. I had just shouted to a full cafe that I wanted a couple of drunk men. Spelling. I was dating a girl in college that was a native Spanish speaker. I was taking Spanish classes at the time and wanted to show her I could speak, so I used to flirt with her in Spanish a lot. One day on IM I tell her I want to kiss her shoulders or something, but instead of hombres I write hombres. Yes, I want to kiss all your sexy men. I asked my American friend who pedsing was. I was pretty new to the US and kept seeing this name on streets everywhere. I figured he was some famous Chinese guy widely revered in America and decided to confirm the reason for his popularity. I know that dude. He usually hangs around the slow children. I was sleeping over at my friend's house, and I wanted to get a bowl of cereal. I told my friend, and he said okay, go for it. I got my bowl, ate, and returned to the festivities after putting the bowl in the sink like a civilized person. Everything was fine, until the morning when I heard a scream. It was his mother, and she was freaking out about the bowl. She saw the spoon in it, and putting 2 and 2 together found out that I had eaten cereal out of it. Apparently, these were special meat bowls, as they belonged to Orthodox Jews. No dairy can touch these bowls, lest their kosheress be compromised. She wanted me to bury the bowl. It was pretty crazy. Back in 2006 I was in Borneo doing some backpacking around SE Asia. At the airport of Kota Kinabalu I went into what I thought was the bathroom. As I enter the room I see what looks like a pee wall, with water flowing down it and such. At the base are at least a dozen pairs of shoes. There's no one around though. I really have to pee, so I'm already unzipping my pants a few paces from the pee wall. While I'm doing this, though, something in the back of my head knows this situation isn't right. Just as I get close to the pee wall, holding out my penis, I put up my free hand against the wall, about ready to release. I hear an approaching voice and look over my shoulder as one does. From the dark adjacent room I see 2 barefoot Muslim men. They're in kurtas, coming towards me, stopping in their tracks, and suddenly, I have a usual suspect moment. That nagging feeling in the back of my head became clear. The shoes, the water fountain, the men in Curtis. I suddenly realized I was in the airport mosque. The shoes were off because they cleaned their feet in the pee wall fountain before going to prayer. In a split second I know that I could be in big freaking trouble. I'm clearly a Westerner and I already could foresee a lynching. It's flee, die, or improvise time. In the next split second I realize that the angle they're coming from the next room they wouldn't see the front of my pants and me holding my penis out. So I lean more on my outstretched arm that is against the wall. With the other hand I pinch my penis to not pee. Oh god that hurts. And stop the whole process. Ouch ouch ouch. And slip my dong back in my pants. I look briefly over my shoulder to see if the two men saw anything and notice they're still a couple meters away. Stop talking. And they are looking at me suspiciously. I move my ex-penis holding hand towards one of my feet, bending over on an exploding bladder as heck, and make to untie my shoes and see if they'd buy the idea that I wanted to wash my feet as well. I manage to untie one shoe and as I'm sliding it off I glance over at them again and smile. They still look like they're not sure what I was doing and if it was kosher or halal I guess, but haven't said or done anything yet. As I make to take off the other shoe, I hear an airplane announcement. I realized later that the announcement wasn't even in a language I understood. I just let out a sigh and say in English, oh well, that's my flight. I guess I won't have time for alu after all. Quickly I slip on my shoe and turn towards the door, away from them. Discreetly zip up my fly on my way out and hope like heck that they bought the whole act and weren't about to jump on my back, pin me down and gut me. In summary, walked into a mosque and almost pee in the cleansing fountain. This isn't that embarrassing I suppose, but when I was in Korea, I was waiting for a bus and I didn't know what time it was. It was kinda late at night and there was only one guy next to me so I turned to him and I wanted to ask him what time it was. I'm Korean, but my Korean isn't that great. In Korean, I said literally do you have the time? What I didn't know was that in Korean, that's how to ask someone on a date. He was taken aback and stammered W. What? And I repeated myself about 2 more times until I realized what I was doing. Not really embarrassing, but why is it 60% of my Hispanic friends, when they want to get out of the car, say get down? The first time I heard it I thought my friend wanted me to bust a move. Because in Spanish, to get out is bajar, which literally means go down. I met a French girl and when she approached me to salad she kissed me in the cheek. I quickly retreated to talk normally but she moved forward approaching my other cheek which she kissed as well. At that point I was a little bit unaware of what was going on and backed a little more to try to talk normally but she kept moving forward to kiss me again in the other cheek. I was kinda confused but smiling and then since I saw her smiling and looking me straight I kinda though she wanted to make out right there. So this time it was me who went forward and tongue kissed her in front of everybody, her BF included. The rest you can imagine. Not me, but a friend of mine did a student exchange in Germany. He was palling around with his host student and teasing him, like guys do, and then he patted his back while laughing, saying just kidding man, I love you. Apparently, his host student flipped out, because that phrase isn't used loosely, as it is in America. He thought he had just received a love confession. This makes complete sense because I read the first line as did an exchange student in Germany. Was trying to explain to my Italian cousins the significance of natural peanut butter as opposed to Skippy Jif. Since I did not know the Italian word for preservatives I merely did what I normally did in that circumstance. Took an English word and made Italian by adding O to the end of it. So I said that it was peanut butter senza preservativus, at which point they were totally confused and laughing right in my face. Apparently preservativus is the Italian word for condoms. So I told them that the peanut butter I was eating didn't contain any condoms. Thank God for that BTW. In nearly all languages that have a derivative of that word, it means condom. The exception is of course English. My grandma was a special ed teacher in NYC. Apparently, one day she had to discipline a Hispanic kid. She told him to look at her while she was talking to him, but he just stared at his feet. Getting angry, she started yelling at him, but the poor kid just kept staring down. Later that day, she realized that he was just trying to be respectful, because looking in someone's eyes when being disciplined is seen as being defiant. She felt awful. I never know where to stare when being disciplined. I don't know what posture to adopt either. So me and a friend are helping out Indian friend move. I see a table that has candles and pictures and oranges and rice on it, and I ask my Indian friend about it. He tells me how they make an offering to the gods when they move, basically to bless the old house and make the new one ready. So me and the Indian are moving a couch when we get out to the front lawn, and there is my other friend kicking orange slices off the front lawn and into the neighbor's yard while almost screaming, "I freaking hate it when people just drop their crap in other people's yards." This was perfect timing as well, because just then the Indian wife and child are carrying a load back from the truck. Their jaws just dropped and I saw the wife tell the child something, but they didn't say a word to my friend. I think that's more of a "my friend has issues" thing. I was in an airport in Taiwan with my dad and he needed to go to the bathroom. He sees a guy who looks like he works at there, so he says to him, "Where is the restroom?" The guy just looks at him. "Restroom?" Guy shakes his head. "Men's room?" Nothing. My dad keeps trying. Guy keeps shaking his head. "Bathroom?" "Lavatory." "Facilities." "John." "Head." "Comfort room." "CR." "Can." 5 minutes of this and running out of names. Finally the guy looks at my dad and says, "Toilet?" Walked into one of my favorite Japanese restaurants in New York City to meet my boyfriend. Hello. Hello. I'm meeting someone, but I'm not sure if he's here already. Team? No. Just one guy. Okay. Go upstairs. 5 steps up the staircase. It hits me. Team. Tim. But in an accent. No. Just one guy bit. That is a direct quote. I read that as if he was asking if you wanted a gangbang. LOL. My co-worker is from China. This sometimes leads to interesting mistakes. One day he came in happy that he joined a new club. When asked what kind, he said fisting. Fisting? Yes. It's great. You should join too. Are you sure it's a fisting club? Yeah, it's really cool. So, what do you do at this club? Workout and stuff. Ooh, you mean fitness, not fisting. No, fisting, you know. I really don't think that means what you think it means. What does it mean? I can't explain it. Just look it up on Google Images. So he goes to the computer and types in fisting in Google. 10 seconds later. Oh my god. Why? Why would someone do that? Why? It was an image of a dude by himself. Needless to say, he doesn't call it a fisting club anymore. Not to me, but I took a Japanese class with a guy I dubbed King Weeaboo. He assumed Japan was this magical land where all the adults read manga and played video games all day long. It was really awkward to watch him try to talk about his favorite games from the 90s or some obscure pop idol with our teacher, who was from Japan. Usually she'd have no idea what he was talking about, since she was a teacher housewife who wasn't too into nerd culture. He'd act surprised when she hadn't heard of the topic, and he'd say something like "what?" But everyone in Japan knows about that because, as an American, he clearly knew more about what Japan likes than the Japanese woman. So it was embarrassing for me, as another American. I guess that story still counts. Not exactly cultural, but this is easily one of my most embarrassing misunderstandings. When I was in college, I was at this party and started talking to this guy who set off my gaydar like no other. I never asked him about it. He never mentioned it, and frankly I didn't care that much. I assumed he was gay, but until he confirmed it I saw no reason to make my suspicion known. But then he started talking about how he possessed the power of gaze and how that it can make babies cry or animals run away. And so I said, I'm pretty sure that's bulls. Just because you're gay doesn't mean you have some kind of supernatural power or control over babies. He looked at me funny and said, "How did you know I was gay? And what does my being gay have anything to do with this?" Turned out he was just talking about the power of gaze, and I felt like a doofus for a good while after that. At least he was gay. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.